Recently, Jack Ma made a high-profile return to China, but today we won't be talking about him. Instead, let's talk about the man behind him. I'm sure many people have heard this story before. In the year 2000, when Jack Ma and Alibaba were in urgent need of financing, a Japanese tycoon offered a helping hand. After just 5 minutes of chatting, he waved his hand and invested $20 million in Jack Ma's project. This investment not only saved Alibaba but also became the most successful venture capital in history, earning a return of 3,000 times. The man behind this investment was Masayoshi Son. Investing in Alibaba was just one scene in his rich and colorful life. He has long been Japan's richest man and has even been the world's richest man for a day. However, I personally think that his most amazing aspect is his radical investment philosophy. His Vision Fund, which has over $100 billion in assets, has swept tech unicorns around the world, causing a frenzy of capital. Today, let's talk about the man behind Jack Ma, Masayoshi Son. Masayoshi Son's company is called SoftBank. I think many people have heard of this name, but it's difficult to explain exactly what the company does in a few words. This company is quite complicated and unique, but I can guarantee that after listening to Ben Katz's wonderful explanation today, you will understand it clearly. Masayoshi Son is of Korean descent and was born in Japan in 1957. He studied very hard from a young age and excelled academically. However, this little son had a very different characteristic from Japanese and Korean children at that time. He was very daring. How should I put it? You will understand after hearing about his experience. When he was 16 years old, he read a best-selling book about business written by the president of McDonald's Japan. He was greatly inspired and felt that business was so fascinating. At the age of 16, he made up his mind to become an entrepreneur. Okay, so up until this point, Masayoshi Son was a relatively normal young person with aspirations and ambitions. But then he became fixated on meeting Mr. Tender Tada, and Masayoshi Son believed that he absolutely had to meet him. He managed to find the phone number for Mr. Tada's assistant and spent all day calling him, begging for a chance to meet Mr. Tada. But imagine, where did a 16-year-old kid come from? They couldn't take him seriously. Masayoshi Son called the assistant 60 or 70 times, but it was all for naught. Not to mention, the calls were long distance, which was very expensive at the time. So he just decided to fly to Tokyo and tell the assistant, "You see, I've come all the way here. Please arrange a way for me to see Mr. Tada, even if it's just from far away for 3 minutes." The assistant saw how sincere Masayoshi Son was and allowed him to speak with Mr. Tada for 15 minutes. During that time, Mr. Tada gave Masayoshi Son 2 important pieces of advice: go to America and learn about computers. And those 2 pieces of advice truly changed Masayoshi Son's life. So without hesitation, the 16-year-old Masayoshi Son followed Mr. Tada's advice and immediately flew to California, USA after finishing high school. You have to admire his drive. After that, he enrolled in the University of California, Berkeley. However, Masayoshi Son's brain started working again, and he asked himself, is there a way for me to make $10,000 a month with just 5 minutes of work a day? After all, I still have to study. He thought of inventing something, so he forced himself to come up with a new invention every day. In less than a year, he had amassed 200 to 300 ideas. One of those ideas was a translation machine, which turned out to be quite feasible. I don't know if you all have seen it, but when I was young, electronic dictionaries like the Wenkyusheng were quite popular. You enter a word, and the machine gives you the translation. The first translation machine was actually invented by Masayoshi Son. Finally, he sold the machine to Sharp for $1.7 million. Later, he started importing game consoles from Japan to sell to American restaurants, which also became very successful and earned him $1.5 million. At that time, Son was only in his early 20s and was constantly meeting with Tadashi Fujita, inventing things and reselling game consoles. In 1980 alone, he made over $3 million. This is why we said before that Son is truly a remarkable entrepreneur, who is naturally talented at succeeding. These are all his own accounts and there may be some self-aggrandizement involved, but you can see from these events that he is a born entrepreneur. After graduating from college in 1981, Son returned to Tokyo from California with the several $1 million he had earned. To be honest, the amount of money he made was something that many people would not dare to dream of earning in their entire lives. However, in addition to being incredibly creative and resourceful, Son also had a strong risk appetite, or what some might call a thick skin or high tolerance for risk. In short, he would never stop until he ran out of chips, whether it was $1 or 10 billion. After this, he gradually developed his own investment philosophy, which you will learn more about as we continue. At the age of 24, with the money he had earned before, Son began thinking about what he should do next. After careful consideration, he decided to start a software distributor, which would wholesale a large number of software programs to computer retailers. Essentially, this was like a software bank, so he named it SoftBank. So when you hear the name SoftBank in English, you might think it sounds like a bank, but the key word here is soft, not bank. It doesn't really have anything to do with banks. Of course, SoftBank's business development in later years has also drifted away from its original software focus. In 1981, at the age of 24, Son founded SoftBank, and for the next decade, the software distribution business flourished. He also published several computer magazines, which helped to open up new channels. Combining these with his software distribution business, he quickly dominated the market. Plus, during those years, the market was rapidly growing anyway, and SoftBank was rapidly expanding. In 1994, SoftBank successfully went public with a market capitalization of $3 billion. This can be considered the first stage of SoftBank's development. For a typical company, going public is already a major achievement, but for someone like Masayoshi Son, it can be said that he has completed the original accumulation of his capital. With these chips, he can go to the table with billions of dollars at stake. While Son is also a businessman, I personally believe that his strength does not lie in micro-level product innovation or company development. He is better at grasping the macro trends of the times and then integrating resources to take advantage of them. Therefore, since going public in 1994, Son has had money to play bigger games. I won't argue with you about micro-level things like product innovation, marketing, or market competition. What I'm competing for is the big picture, the big trend. As long as I, Masayoshi Son, see a direction I like the internet, then I'll spend money to buy a bunch of companies and play bigger than anyone else. As for the specific product details, I, Masayoshi Son, don't care. If you want to go, go. This led to Son's first highlight moment of investment in 1995 when he targeted a rapidly growing company, Yahoo, which only had 15 people at the time. Son was very generous, investing $100 million up front to take a 30% stake. You can imagine how big a sum that was. Jerry Yang, the founder of Yahoo, was hesitant to accept this investment because although the money was a lot, diluting 30% of the shares at once was still a cause for concern. Son threatened them by saying that if they didn't take the $1 billion, he would invest the money in their competitors, like Excite and Lycos. You better think it over quickly. You see, this forceful investment, which Jerry Yang was hesitant to accept, became a frequently used tactic for Son and helped him successfully invest in Yahoo. In 2012, Yahoo went public on the Nasdaq, and Son's investment immediately increased 2.5 times in value. In the following years, with the help of the Internet bubble, Yahoo continued to grow into a company worth billions of dollars. But this was not Son's most successful investment. He wanted to take the game even bigger by bringing Yahoo into Japan. So in 1996, SoftBank invested $72 million and established a joint venture with Yahoo in Japan called Yahoo Japan, which for a long time was Japan's largest portal website and search engine. By 2004, Yahoo Japan's market value had exceeded $50 billion, surpassing Yahoo globally and bringing SoftBank returns of several hundred times. It also became one of SoftBank's main business pillars. It's not over yet. A few years later, another big moment for Masayoshi Son occurred. As we mentioned at the beginning, in the year 2000, he invested in Alibaba. According to his recollection, even back then, Jack Ma couldn't present a decent business plan. However, Masayoshi Son was impressed by Jack Ma and was already optimistic about the e-commerce industry. After a brief conversation with Jack Ma, Masayoshi Son invested $20 million in Alibaba, which represented a 34.4% stake. This investment turned into $60 billion when Alibaba went public 14 years later, a 3,000-fold return. At the height of Alibaba's market value in 2019 and 2020, SoftBank's stake accounted for over half of the company. Thanks to these two investments in Yahoo and Alibaba, Masayoshi Son became famous for his early and accurate investments with a large scale. He achieved a level of fame that could be compared to Warren Buffett. Of course, Yahoo and Alibaba are just two typical examples. Between 1996 and 2000, Masayoshi Son invested in 250 internet companies and other companies that he saw potential in. This turned his SoftBank empire, which was originally a company that sold software and magazines, into a large group with a diverse range of businesses. While most companies organize their business by product, SoftBank's business is spread out in various fields, such as software, media, internet, finance, and more. In 1999, SoftBank became a holding company, with various subsidiaries under its umbrella, and all with a wide range of businesses. If you look at SoftBank's annual report from 1999, you will see 6 major business sectors, including software, media, internet, finance, and more. This SoftBank Group became a holding company in 1999, with a myriad of subsidiaries, all with a wide range of businesses. If you look up the number of employees in SoftBank Group now, you will be surprised to know that it has 255 subsidiaries. It's not 255,000 nor 2.55 million, but 255 individuals. You might find it funny that a company worth hundreds of billions or even trillions of dollars only has 255 employees. However, this is because it is a pure holding company. In reality, all of its subsidiaries have over 60,000 employees, not including the companies it invests in. I would estimate that half of those 255 employees are at the C-level. I think this is an interesting fact and wanted to share it with everyone. In any case, Masayoshi Son believed that the internet had potential, so he spent over 50 billion yen to buy Yahoo and CNET. When he believed that finance had potential, he spent another 55 billion yen to buy E-Trade and Morningstar. When he thought technology had potential, he went and bought Kingston. This is Masayoshi Son's style and SoftBank's style. Instead of working hard to build something himself, he just invests money to buy companies, firmly believing that he is heading in the right direction. So how did he do in the end? He did have a lot of unsuccessful investments, like Kingston, which was a high buy low sell deal. However, overall, he saw the potential of the internet and made a lot of investments and acquisitions in internet companies and businesses, just in time for the dot-com bubble. You can imagine how much the founders of these internet companies were worth during that time. However, Masayoshi Son and SoftBank were the ones who really made it big. Before the bubble burst, SoftBank Group's market value reached $200 billion, and Masayoshi Son became the richest person in the world for one day. But when the bubble was rising, it was incredibly hot. When it burst and fell, it was incredibly tragic. The S&P 500 fell by more than 40%, and the Nasdaq fell by more than 70%. SoftBank's market value was wiped out by 99%, falling from $200 billion to $2 billion. Masayoshi Son's $70 billion fortune also disappeared. During those years, Masayoshi Son faced enormous controversy and was on the verge of bankruptcy. He lost $1 billion every year. Almost all of his investments were losing money, Yahoo's stock price plummeted, and Alibaba was far from going public. This was almost the darkest period that Masayoshi Son had ever faced. You can't even imagine the pressure he faced every day at that time. So Masayoshi Son had to focus his attention on real industries again, because he needed a new pillar business that could give him capital to help him continue to expand his grand strategy. And he really hit the mark again. He first targeted the popularization of home networks and entered the broadband business in 2001, establishing Yahoo Broadband. In 2004, he also bought Japan Telecom, which helped him get through the most difficult period. After that, Masayoshi Son targeted the popularization of smartphones and entered the telecommunications business. There's a little anecdote here. Masayoshi Son contacted his idol, Steve Jobs. At that time, Apple hadn't yet released the iPhone, but the iPod, which was used for music listening, was selling like hotcakes. So Masayoshi Son drew a sketch of an iPod that could make phone calls for Steve Jobs to see and said, "Old Joe, you can make this thing. Can you let me help you sell it in Japan?" Steve Jobs was very surprised because the iPhone was already in development at that time and hadn't been released yet. Old Joe told Masayoshi Son, "We're actually making this thing." Masayoshi Son said, "Great. If you can make it, can you let me help you sell it in Japan?" Steve Jobs laughed and said, "Son, SoftBank doesn't do mobile business." "Are you kidding me?" Masayoshi Son said, "Yes, we don't do it now, but we will." When he returned to Japan, he immediately entered the mobile business, acquiring Vodafone Japan. 2 years later, the iPhone was released, and SoftBank became the exclusive distributor of the iPhone in Japan. Later, SoftBank acquired a U.S. telecommunications operator, Sprint, and convinced Trump to complete the merger of Sprint and T-Mobile. In fact, if you look at the SoftBank Group, it acquired the business unit that was Vodafone Japan, the company that does telecommunications business, and renamed it SoftBank Corp., which is the SoftBank company. So if someone asks you one day, "What does SoftBank do?" you need to confirm with them first whether they are referring to the SoftBank Group or SoftBank Corp. In summary, Son Masayoshi successfully seized the opportunity in the industrial sector and began making money from 2005 onwards. His revenue also increased year by year. In 2014, a fruit he had planted earlier finally bore fruit, which was the listing of Alibaba. Son Masayoshi became confident again and re-entered the investment market. In 2016, he targeted a new direction, chips, and aimed at the semiconductor company ARM. His very aggressive investment strategy, based on observing trends and market developments, proved successful. Currently, over 95% of mobile phone chips on the market, including Apple's M chip, are based on ARM architecture. Son Masayoshi spent $32 billion to acquire ARM, despite some people thinking he overpaid. However, he is more afraid of making a wrong investment than overpaying. Although SoftBank struggled to digest the ARM business, it has become a major pillar of the SoftBank Group. In 2010, Son Masayoshi released an important vision for SoftBank's next 30 years, which is still a critical part of the company's website. He believes that to understand SoftBank's future development, you need to know how humanity will develop in the next 300 years. He believes that computers will soon surpass human brains, and the singularity will arrive in a matter of decades. At that time, human society will undergo profound changes, and Son Masayoshi hopes to use investment to preemptively occupy the industry's top position and embrace the singularity. To be honest, with ChatGPT's recent popularity, do you feel like the singularity may be coming soon? But let's not discuss that. What I want to talk about is Masayoshi Son. He wants to invest from a high perspective and height, not just settle for telecommunications or buying ARM. He hopes to make progress in technology for all of humanity. This is why he tried to create the robot Pepper and bought Boston Dynamics. But he knows that with SoftBank's current financial resources, achieving such a grand vision is challenging. So in 2017, he decided to establish a venture capital fund, a $100 billion fund, the world's largest technology venture capital fund, to invest in future Alibaba, and he called this fund the Vision Fund. But having a vision is not enough. You also need money. So Son thought of the oil-rich Saudi Crown Prince MBS. Son once again had a moment of glory when he met MBS, saying, "I have a $1 trillion gift to offer to you. Are you interested, Your Highness?" MBS immediately became interested, and Son continued, "Just give me $100 billion, and I can turn it into $1 trillion. The two laughed and agreed. This detail may be a bit exaggerated, but Son and the Saudi prince talked for 45 minutes and secured a $45 billion investment. Some people may not fully understand the significance of $450 billion, but this amount alone is enough to make it into the top 10 hedge funds globally. Of course, the Saudi prince wasn't easily fooled. On the one hand, he did have investment needs, and on the other hand, he was impressed by Son's successful investment history. With $1 trillion, SoftBank's Vision Fund was launched, and SoftBank entered a new era of investment. SoftBank invested $450 billion, and the Saudi prince contributed nearly half of that amount. SoftBank raised an additional $55 billion from other investors, including Apple, Qualcomm, Foxconn, and others. SoftBank's investment totaled $100 billion, allowing the world's most ambitious science and technology investment fund to begin. For someone so radical, you can't expect him to slowly find opportunities and invest with a $100 billion giant fund. That's clearly not the case with Masayoshi Son, who immediately swept through emerging technology markets around the world. In fact, with a fund of this size, there's no need for trade-offs. You just need to identify which unicorn has good growth potential and invest. Although his previous vision was lofty and spoke from the perspective of all humanity, when it comes to actual investment, he invests in whatever is hot, even to the extent that many companies are ignited by his investments. You see, if there was a race that could have been funded and developed normally, but once Masayoshi Son had his sights set on it, the Vision Fund would come and say, "You only need $50 million for this round. No, I'm going to give you $500 million to be your major shareholder. You have a year to quickly spend the money and dominate the market, otherwise, I'll go invest in your competitor's company." And SoftBank's style is to be more assertive after investing. They have several seats on the board of directors, controlling the company's strategic development. They make sure you dream big, go international, and think big, expanding quickly and globalizing as soon as possible. Masayoshi Son also knows that new emerging markets in the internet industry are monopolistic, where the winner takes all. His strategy is to quickly capture the top of the market and then go public, forcing the entire industry into a money-burning and market-grabbing mode. In 3 years, Masayoshi Son invested over $80 billion in more than 80 companies, including well-known ones like Didi, Uber, WeWork, Coupang, and Grab, as well as Jumin Insurance and others. Later, Masayoshi Son felt that $100 billion was not enough, so he launched Vision Fund 2, planning to raise another $100 billion. However, due to the controversy surrounding the aggressive and large-scale approach of Vision Fund 1, Vision Fund 2 could hardly attract external investors, and Masayoshi Son himself had to invest more than $50 billion. In addition to these two Vision Funds, in 2019, Masayoshi Son established a $7.3 billion Latin American fund. These three funds together form the SoftBank Group, which is now a very important and famous part of the company. In summary, the SoftBank Group, with more than 250 people, manages a diverse group of subsidiaries, including its mobile business, the similarly named SoftBank Company, the popular Japanese chat app Line, and shares in T-Mobile and Deutsche Telekom. Although most of the company's revenue comes from its mobile business, it only accounts for about 10% of its market value. Sure. Here's the translation. Okay. Another big part of SoftBank is the ARM semiconductor business we talked about earlier. That's right, ARM is a big chunk of SoftBank, and when Masayoshi Son bought ARM, he went all in and took 100% ownership. Another big part of SoftBank was Alibaba, which they sold in 2022. They had nearly half of Alibaba's shares at the time, but now they only hold around 15%. But SoftBank's biggest part is probably the Vision funds, along with their Latin America fund, which they invest in. Of course, we can only count the part that SoftBank invests their own money in, and not the whole fund. From the value of their investment portfolio, it's probably around $70 minus $80 billion. The rest is just some miscellaneous businesses and companies. As for their mobile business, that's actually pretty stable, so their stock price and performance fluctuations are relatively small. As for SoftBank's stock price fluctuations, you can roughly consider it as a combination of the Vision funds, Alibaba, and ARM, which hasn't gone public yet. So if there isn't much big news about ARM, SoftBank's fluctuations will be similar to the fluctuations of the Vision funds and Alibaba. That's why there's a pretty strong correlation between Alibaba and SoftBank's stock prices. This is also why you can roughly consider SoftBank as an investment company, and the results of their investments haven't been great so far. This is mainly due to several notable failed investments, one of the most famous being WeWork. Maybe because Masayoshi Son wanted to replicate his investment in Jack Ma back then, he had a lot of faith in his intuition about the founder. The co-founder of WeWork, Adam Neumann, was really radical and arrogant. After meeting him briefly, Son felt that he was not ordinary and could possibly be the next Jack Ma. So he decided to invest $4.4 billion in him and even said to Neumann before leaving, "I don't think you're crazy enough yet." This guy Neumann became even more crazy and started throwing money around everywhere. But WeWork suffered greatly, as its IPO was blocked and the market discovered that it was severely overvalued with serious debt problems. SoftBank had to rescue WeWork by buying out most of its shares for $9.5 billion, but it struggled to go public and was eventually valued at only $1.5 billion, which cost SoftBank more than $10 billion in losses. Even Son admitted that this was one of his biggest investment failures. Son's other biggest investment failure was Didi, which was also the largest investment of his Vision fund. Didi finally went public in 2021, but it was delisted shortly after due to regulatory issues, causing SoftBank to lose around $10 billion. SoftBank has both successful and unsuccessful investments, but investments like WeWork have not only caused financial losses but also negative publicity and doubts about Son's investment philosophy. Some even think he is a gambler. As a result, SoftBank's stock price has to be discounted when factoring in investments like Alibaba, Vision Fund, ARM, and SoftBank Group. The market perceives Son as too unpredictable and risky, so it's difficult to tell whether he's investing or gambling. For example, in 2020, there was a very mysterious buyer in the market who spent $4 billion to buy some technology companies like Apple, Tesla, Amazon, and Microsoft. These companies had call options that were highly valued, causing rumors to spread throughout the market. This mysterious buyer was later revealed to be SoftBank, led by Masayoshi Son. The call options were essentially bets on the future stock price of these companies within a certain time frame. If the stock price increased significantly within that time frame, the buyer would make a lot of money, but if it didn't, the money invested would essentially be lost. When this news was revealed, SoftBank's shareholders were very concerned because Masayoshi Son had publicly stated that he was looking at the development of humanity over the next 300 years, and yet he was making short-term bets. This made SoftBank's stock price more volatile. In 2022, the decline of Chinese tech stocks, coupled with the depreciation of the yen, made life difficult for the Vision Fund. Even compared to other similar funds, it ranked last in performance. SoftBank had to lay off employees, sell Alibaba shares, or buy back its own shares to stabilize its shareholders, the market, and the banks. In November 2022, Masayoshi Son announced that he would gradually divest from the company's business and focus on helping ARM go public. From the start of the Vision Fund, it was difficult to capture alpha, or outperformance, and instead, SoftBank was investing in beta, or market performance. The fund cast a wide net to invest quickly, making it difficult to find good companies and generate excess returns. SoftBank's investment style is more aggressive, and the companies it invests in carry higher risks and higher beta. So when the market is good, I look stronger than anyone else. For example, when DoorDash, Coupang went public in 2021, SoftBank's returns skyrocketed, but when the market was down in 2022, they plummeted. A $100+ billion fund was like riding a roller coaster. You could say it was exciting. Now let's look back at Masayoshi Son's ups and downs. Did he rely on his skills or luck for his previous successes? Is he an investment master or a gambler? Everyone probably has their own answer in their hearts. This person is definitely very insightful and courageous, or else how could he be Japan's richest person for so many years? If you watch his interviews, you'll find he's quite humorous too. But his extremely aggressive investment strategy is definitely unreasonable from a risk management perspective, so he definitely had luck in making money. In this world, success or failure ultimately determines who is a hero. In the past few years, Son and SoftBank lost money, so he received a lot of criticism. But if there is a bull market for tech stocks in a few years, Son and SoftBank could easily return to the top of the world. However, I estimate that with Son's personality, he'll probably go all in again and create a $500+ billion fund.